You're still playing with fabric at 32. Aunt Margaret's voice dripped with the kind of pity reserved for stray animals and unmarried women. What she didn't know was that the fabric I was hemming would be worn by 3 Oscar winners in exactly 6 hours. But how could I tell her that when she'd already decided I was a failure? The Easter brunch at my parents' Connecticut estate was the same performance it had been every year since I'd left my marketing job at 26. The good china, the passive-aggressive compliments, the unspoken disappointment that hung in the air like expensive perfume. Us, the youngest of the Montgomery daughters, and according to family consensus, the one who'd thrown away her potential to pursue a little hobby. "Isabella, darling," my mother said, her smile tight as she refilled mimosa glasses, "your aunt asked you a question. Are you still doing that sewing thing?" That sewing thing had revenue projections of $47 million this year. I just nodded and continued working the needle through silk that costs more per yard than most people's monthly rent. "It's actually quite sweet," my older sister Victoria chimed in. She was a corporate attorney, the family success story, with her partnership at 35 and her surgeon husband. Some women need creative outlets. Not everyone can handle high-pressure careers. Bit the inside of my cheek and focused on my stitches. The irony was almost painful. In 4 days I'd be standing in the Carousel du Louvre, presenting my debut collection to fashion's most ruthless critics. But my family genuinely believed I spent my days making Pinterest crafts in my apartment. "Do you know what you should do?" my cousin Jennifer said, leaning forward with wine-bright enthusiasm. "Etsy. You could sell them on Etsy. My friend made $300 last month selling crocheted plant hangers. That's actually a great idea," Aunt Margaret agreed, her jewelry catching the light as she gestured. "Turn your little hobby into something productive. Pin money, you know. Every woman should have her own pin money." My phone vibrated against my thigh. I ignored it. "The problem," my father said from the head of the table, his tone carrying that gentle disappointment I'd grown up with, "is that Isabella has always been more interested in fantasy than reality. Pretty things instead of practical things." Victoria nodded sympathetically. "Remember when she wanted to go to Parsons instead of Harvard? Thank God Dad talked sense into her. I'd gotten into both. Parsons had offered me a full scholarship after seeing my portfolio. But my father had said fashion school was professional suicide and insisted I get a real degree in business. So, I went to Harvard, majored in marketing, and spent 4 years dying inside while everyone congratulated me on my sensible choice." "Isabella did very well at Harvard," my mother said defensively, though her tone suggested she was trying to convince herself. "She had that nice job at that marketing firm," had being the operative word, Uncle Richard added, reaching for more ham. "What was it, Bella? 5 years at a solid company, good salary, benefits, and you just walked away. To do what, exactly?" "To build an empire," I thought, but I said nothing. My phone buzzed again, and again. I could feel it lighting up my lap like a strobe light, but I kept my hand steady on the needle. This was a test I'd perfected over 6 years. Let them talk, let them assume, let them condescend. The truth was so far beyond their comprehension that explaining it felt pointless. "She works from her apartment," Victoria offered, as if presenting evidence in court. "No office, no employees, no structure. It's not sustainable. Bella, you're 32. Don't you think it's time to consider something more established?" The dress I was hemming a bias cut silk gown in midnight blue would be photographed by every major fashion publication in the world by this time next week. The woman wearing it had won 2 Oscars and a Golden Globe. She'd paid $200,000 for the privilege of being dressed by that new designer everyone's talking about. But to my family, I was unemployed. "I'm doing fine," I said quietly. "Fine isn't good enough," my father said, his voice taking on that edge it got when he was about to launch into a lecture. "You're a Harvard graduate, Isabella. You could be making 6 figures at any major firm. Instead, you single, quotes, double, quotes." He waved his hand vaguely at my sewing, doing arts and crafts. My phone was vibrating continuously now. Someone was calling repeatedly. I continued stitching. "Maybe she could get back into marketing," Jennifer suggested. My company is hiring. It's entry level, but it's a start. $38,000 a year plus benefits. Last year, my personal income was $6.2 million. This year's projections had me crossing $9 million before December. But I just smiled politely at Jennifer's generosity. That's kind of you, I said. See. This is what I mean, Aunt Margaret said, turning to my mother with that conspiratorial tone that made my jaw clench. She's so passive, so unfocused. Where's the ambition? The drive? Victoria has it. Why doesn't Isabella? Because I'm spending it building something you can't see, I thought. Because I work 18-hour days in a studio you've never asked about. Because I've dressed royalties, celebrities, and billionaires' wives. But you've never once asked to see my work. Victoria leaned back in her chair, wineglass in hand, studying me with clinical detachment. I think it's fear, honestly. Bella was always the sensitive one. She's scared of real competition, real stakes. It's easier to hide behind a hobby than risk failing at something legitimate. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were true, but because they were so blindingly false. I'd risked everything 6 years ago. I'd walked away from security, from approval, from everything my family valued. I'd worked until my fingers bled. I'd survived on ramen and rejection. I'd heard no from every major fashion house in New York before I finally heard one. Yes, that changed everything. Bidet. But they didn't know. They'd never asked. My phone was ringing again. The vibration was loud enough now that people were starting to notice. Isabella, my mother said sharply, your phone. It's fine, I said. It's clearly not fine, Victoria said. Someone's trying to reach you desperately. Maybe it's an emergency. I set down my sewing carefully and pulled out my phone. The screen was flooded with notifications. 17 missed calls, 43 texts, all from my assistant Dominique. Vogue confirmed for front row. Celebrities confirmed A-list. All of them runway. Shows sold out in 12 minutes. Backstage is chaos. Where are you? Harper's Bazaar wants exclusive interview. Anna Wintour's office called again. Call me now. Paris is losing their minds. My heart rate's kicked up. This was real. After 6 years of clawing my way up from nothing, this was actually happening. My debut at Paris Fashion Week. The moment every designer dreams of. Anne. I was sitting at my family's Easter brunch, being told to sell crocheted plant hangers on Etsy. Everything all right? My father asked, his tone suggesting I was being dramatic. Fine, I said, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. Just work. Work, Uncle Richard repeated with a chuckle. Bella, you don't have work. You have a hobby that you're pretending is a career. I looked up at him. At all of them. My family, sitting around this table in their expensive clothes and their expensive house, congratulating themselves on their success, while dismissing mine. Something inside me just broke. Not in a bad way. In a clarifying way. Actually, I said quietly, setting my phone face up on the table, I need to leave. Leave. My mother's eyes widened. Isabella, we haven't even had dessert. And you know how Aunt Margaret loves your company. I have a flight to catch. A flight. Victoria laughed. Bella, where could you possibly need to fly to on Easter Sunday? Paris. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Paris, my father repeated flatly. France, Paris. Yes, for what, exactly? Aunt Margaret's smile was indulgent, as if I'd just announced I was going to Disneyland. I picked up the dress I'd been hemming. The silk caught the light, shimmering like water. This dress will be worn by Kate Blanchett tomorrow night at my Paris Fashion Week debut show. I need to finish the final fitting. The silence was profound. You're ... what? My mother said faintly. My phone rang again. This time I answered it, putting it on speaker. Dominique, Bella. Oh my God, where are you? My assistant's voice was frantic with excitement. Vogue just confirmed Anna Wintour is coming. Anna Wintour, and Rihanna's stylist called she wants 4 looks. 4. And you re-trending on Twitter because someone leaked one of the designs and people are losing their minds. Dominique, I interrupted gently. I'm at brunch with my family. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Your family. Her voice shifted to horror. Bella, your flight leaves in 3 hours. You need to be at JFK like now. I know. 5 minutes, I hung up. Every eye at the table was on me. Paris Fashion Week, Victoria said slowly, as if testing the words, is for established designers. Major houses. You can't just show at Paris Fashion Week. You can if you're invited, I said, and if Chambray Syndical de la Haute Couture approves your collection. Which they did unanimously. My father's face had gone pale. Isabella, what are you talking about? I pulled up my email and turned my phone so they could see. The official invitation from Paris Fashion Week. The confirmation from Vogue. The approval letter from Chambray Syndical. The booking confirmations from the Carousel du Louvre. I've been designing under my own label for 6 years, I said quietly. Montgomery Atelier. Tight. Started in a studio apartment in Brooklyn, with a single sewing machine I bought secondhand. I made dresses for friends, then friends of friends, then someone wore one of my designs to a film premiere, and a stylist noticed. That led to more celebrities. That led to investors. That led to this. Jennifer was scrolling frantically on her phone. Oh my God, she whispered. Montgomery Atelier is you, the designer everyone's talking about. Blake Lively wore your dress to the Met Gala. That was last year, I confirmed. Zendaya wore your suit to the Oscars. Jennifer continued, her voice rising. Jennifer Lawrence, Lupita Nyong'o, Emma Stone, they've all worn your designs. There are articles about you in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, WWD. I know, I said simply. Aunt Margaret's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against her plate. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine hurt in her voice. I tried, I said. 3 years ago, I invited you all to my first major showcase in New York. You said you were busy. 2 years ago, I was featured in a New York Times profile. I sent you the link. You never mentioned reading it. Last year, when I dressed 7 actresses for awards season, I asked if you wanted to watch the red carpet coverage with me. You said fashion was trivial. The silence was crushing. You just assumed I was failing. I continued, so I stopped trying to correct you. It was easier to let you think whatever you wanted to think than to constantly fight for your attention or approval. Victoria's face had gone red. That's not fair, Bella. We would have supported you if we'd known you were actually successful, would you? I interrupted. Because I've been successful for 4 years. I bought my own apartment in Tribeca 2 years ago. I have 12 employees. I dress some of the most famous women in the world, and not once did any of you ask about my work, beyond making sure I knew how much you disapproved of it. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. I stood up, carefully folding the dress. My show is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Paris time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern. It'll be live-streamed on Vogue's website. You're welcome to watch if you want. Bella. Wait, my mother said, standing. We didn't know. We should have asked. I finished. You should have asked. But you didn't. And now I really do have to go, or I'll miss my flight. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Bella, Victoria called out. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. I turned back. They looked shell-shocked, confused, smaller somehow than they had an hour ago. I know you are, I said. But I can't miss this moment, because you're sorry. This is the biggest night of my career, and I've worked 6 years for it. So you can either watch and celebrate with me from here, or you can keep assuming I'm the family failure. Your choice. Ty. I walked out into the April sunshine. My phone already ringing with Dominique's panicked calls about travel logistics. And for the first time in 6 years, I felt completely, entirely free. The show was a triumph. Anna Wintour stood and applauded. 3 major department stores made offers before I even left the venue. By the time I returned to my hotel that night, my inbox was flooded with opportunities that would have seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. And my phone had 17 messages from my family. All variations of, we watched, we had no idea. We're so proud. I read them in my hotel room, overlooking the Eiffel Tower, still wearing the same dress I'd hemmed at brunch, and smiled. Date finally asked. Better late than never, I supposed. But the empire I'd built, that was mine. Built in silence, born from determination, crafted from every dismissive comment they'd ever made. And I wouldn't trade a single moment of it for their approval. Not anymore.